as well as the 2021 list of high-achieving leaders under 40 as awarded by the Foreign Minister. Today, Nada's topic will be about women leaders thriving in the digital era, harnessing digital IQ and emotional intelligence. And fun fact, if you do have any questions at the end, you can ask them in one of 5 languages. Nada speaks English, Urdu, French, Spanish, or Norwegian. Please help me welcoming Nada Ahmed.
Thank you. Okay. Can everyone hear me? Yeah, the mic works. Okay, awesome, perfect. Yeah, I'm not going to start speaking to you in Norwegian. Someone said this, yeah, this works. Okay, good. A few weeks ago, I was aimlessly scrolling the internet, or rather the LinkedIn, feeling uninspired, and I came across this headline. It said, "Women are less interested in AI than men, but using it would help them advance at work." Now, I don't know about you, but I found it kind of unsettling, and I couldn't quite pinpoint what it was. So I decided to send it to a few of my really good, trusted girlfriends, and I was like, does this feel odd to you, this headline? And this was the response from one of my really good friends. She said, "Imagine AI can help you find milk in the fridge. What a productivity boost." Now, Sarah is a portfolio manager at one of the biggest pension funds in the world. She is managing billions of dollars in assets, and she's one of the smartest people I know. And she's just had a baby. And she went on to ensue her rant. She said, "Nada, I do not understand how a species who can't find anything in the fridge has a complete meltdown when I leave them with the baby and cannot plan 2 hours in advance, are assumed to be fit to lead our nations and our workforce." And now, just because they're assumed to be more interested in AI, they're going to be even better geniuses than we already think they are. And she pretty much summed up how I felt. This headline felt, and also other headlines, this is not just one, feel patronizing, condescending, and I think dangerous. She captured perfectly what needs to change when we're having this conversation about technology and women. Because it's not just one headline, it's not just one tech story, it's the narrative. It's about influence and it's about power. But, headlines are often clickbait, as we all know, and as this headline is. Let's dig into what the data was really saying and what this headline was based on. So when you look at the data that this was based off of, it was based off of this study done by Oliver Wyman Research of 25,000 workers. And they surveyed men and women, and they asked them, how often do you use generative AI? And they found out that 51% of women use generative AI tools at least once a week, and 59% of men use generative AI tools once a week. This 8% difference became the story about the lack of interest of women in technology. That's the headline that it became, and this is not only dangerous, I think, it's not only revealing, it's also misleading, and it reveals kind of 3 big assumptions that we make about women and technology. One, it assumes that AI adoption is somehow this magic key to our career advancement, as if we start using ChatGPT, the complex issue of gender inequality at work will magically be solved. Secondly, It frames our thoughtful consideration of AI use as technology hesitation. Maybe, just maybe, we're making conscious decisions on when to use AI and when not to use AI. Thirdly, this is the most telling. Nowhere in the research did women say they were not interested in AI. They were basing that off of data that said that there are more men enrolled in AI training programs than women. But if you dug deeper into the data, women also said, they told us the reasons of why they weren't enrolling in these AI programs. The number one reason was cost. We all know we don't make as much money as our male colleagues. And second, and more importantly, was time. Women still bear the brunt of household responsibilities at home. We have childcare responsibilities, generally just taking care of everything at home. And we have to prioritize ruthlessly. We don't have time to just sit there and take some AI training course. It's a big challenge. So it's not really a problem of interest or ability. It's really a problem of access and opportunity. But data only tells us part of the story. There are many women in the room, so let's take a pulse here. Let's do a little survey of our own. If you can, by just raising your hand, tell me how many of you have used ChatGPT at least once for work-related tasks? Or any AI tool. Now keep your hands up for those who have used ChatGPT regularly, who use it regularly, or any other AI tool. Okay, like about, half of the room. Now let me ask you a different question. How many of you believe that women need digital upskilling compared to our male colleagues? You don't believe that we need digital upskilling? Only one or two? Okay, this is good, because if you had all raised your hand, it would really throw me off. Okay, good, because we're in the year 2024. We entered the digital era in the 1990s, at the dawn of the internet. We have grown up with computers. We wouldn't be in our jobs today if we weren't digitally competent. But I get why some of us, might feel that there's a gap, because there is somewhat of a gap, because if you look at women graduating from computer science in school, it's still at about 20 to 25% of women are studying computer science today. And if you further dig into the data, it's actually very interesting to see the history of women in the field of tech in particular. This is a graph from a story I heard on NPR many years ago, when I found it fascinating. The red line here shows you women in computer science from kind of the early 1960s to about 2010 and onwards. And the other blue lines are other STEM technical fields, medical school, law school, and physical science. And you see, in the early years of when computer programming was introduced, there were more women entering the field than men. The women entering the field of tech was higher than men. And if any of you have seen the movie Hidden Figures, in the 1960s, women were really at the forefront of computer programming. They were the pioneers, because programming at that point was very mechanical. It was very routine. In the early days, someone would kind of make the plan for you and give it to a clerk, and that clerk would be like the computer programmer. So, men were like, that's a good job for women. But then suddenly, two things happened. One, we started making a lot of advancement in technology, and there was a big demand for computer programmers. And first, the salaries of a computer programmer were very low, and suddenly they began to rise. And then men were like, we want these jobs too. And so there was a rush of men coming into these tech jobs. And secondly, what happened here is what you see with this red figure here, is that there's a drop around mid-1980s. Around 1984 was the introduction of home computers, of personal computers at home. And you would think, that should be good for everybody, but it wasn't, because what happened was these early computers were essentially toys, and they were specifically marketed towards boys. There were games on it that were for boys, and the whole narrative around this was created around this tech culture. You have to be very mathematically inclined, you have to be antisocial, and you have to be like a geek or a nerd. And there were lots of movies in the 1980s that kind of displayed and portrayed this techie, someone who's working on a computer. And that started this narrative about computers being for boys. And so even when you had someone like Patricia Ordonez, who is today a professor of computer science at University of Puerto Rico, she was a math prodigy. And when she went to Johns Hopkins to do a degree in computer science, she felt like she was behind compared to her male classmates because they had already had computers at home. They had access to those computers. And the professors assumed that you had that unspoken exposure to technology that she didn't have. And she was not alone. She was not unique in this. A lot of women struggled to catch up to that gap that existed of not having that exposure, and then ended up dropping out also as this narrative prevailed of, women are not really welcome here. This is something more for boys and for men. But this was the 1980s. We're not in the 1980s anymore, and access is no longer holding us back. My son just entered 3rd grade. He's 8 years old, and he got his own Chromebook. He has a computer he carries to work with him, and he plays all these games, and he uses tools that I use, Canva, and shows me how to do fun things on it. And I'm pretty sure they gave that Chromebook to every girl in his classroom too. So access is no longer the issue. What we're really battling with is this psyche and this narrative that's kind of seeped into our entire society, especially, I think, in the West. I'm originally from Pakistan, and if you look at the data from Southeast Asia, from Malaysia, India, and even in a country like Pakistan, if a woman does get to have an education, about 50% of women are enrolled in tech fields in India, and even more so in Malaysia. And there, it's about sustainability, it's about having a decent career, it's about security. And I think this thing about this narrative about it being like a man thing doesn't quite exist the way it does in a lot of our Western societies. But here's the plot twist. The rules of the game are changing. With AI, something different is happening. AI democratizes technology, because now you don't even have to go to school to use this technology to code. Tools like ChatGPT, cloud, no-code platforms are making technology more accessible to everybody. So if you are a marketing professional, now you can create your own website. You don't have to learn the programming tools like HTML, like CSS. Instead, you can use these no-code platforms. You can go on Squarespace and make your own website. A business analyst now doesn't have to do complex SQL, but instead you can use natural language. You can use your own language to analyze these tools. Send it to ChatGPT or other processing tools. Writers can create basic images using DALL-E or Midjourney without graphic design skills. So this barrier that we had early on in terms of like this technological barrier, AI is really removing that. Because we're going from that shift from command line interfaces where you're kind of talking in a language that you can't understand, it's like 1010 and brackets, to conversational AI, and that really removes the psychological barrier. Natural language processes mean people can interact with technology in their own words. Compare writing a Python script for data analysis, something that I had to do early on in my career, to now just sending it to ChatGPT. And it would help you analyze the spreadsheet. So what this headline is really saying is, watch out, men, women are coming for your jobs. Because really, this is really more of an opportunity than anything else. But there's a caveat. Because together with this age of AI, as much as it's democratizing it and making it more accessible for all of us, there's also two major shifts that AI is bringing towards us. The first one I want to talk about is this automation wave. Because AI takeover is real. Some of these headlines talk about it as if it's going to happen in the future, but it's happening today. Here are some examples of companies that have already replaced hundreds, thousands of employees. MSN, for example, they used to have a dozen or more journalists working on the web page that you first open up and shows you the news. They don't have journalists doing that anymore. AI can do that very effectively. Google has completely streamlined its customer care and sales process and has let go thousands of people because now they have teams that were before 150 people are now being run by 1 or 2 people. They've deployed AI at a very, very large scale. Then there's a company like IKEA, which phased out its call centers and is now using an AI bot called Billy. But IKEA did something different. Does anyone know where IKEA is from? Sweden. Yeah, it's a Scandinavian company. And I spent about a decade working in Norway, which is why I speak Norwegian. IKEA, instead of laying off its workers, they upskilled them. They put them through a training program so that they could become interior designers. Because guess what? That's not something that AI can do, not just yet, not as well as us. So it's really about capitalizing on these opportunities and also taking care of our workforce. And I think for us, what's important to remember is that automation's happening, and we cannot run away from it. We cannot run away from using these tools, and just remembering that people who use AI will be the ones who replace those who don't. And how we thrive in the age of AI, it really depends on 3 things that we're going to talk about today. The first one is automate. Automating your task and embracing AI and technology. And I'll talk a bit about how you can start doing that right now. Then we'll talk about data literacy. I think Sandy mentioned data is really important. Telling the story about the data is really important, and that's going to become more and more important. What's not as important as crunching data is still important, but what's even more important is telling that story around that data. And the human edge, this is the most fun part, guys. This is about doubling down on what makes us uniquely human. Those are going to be the success skills of the future. Our creativity, our critical thinking, our empathy, our emotional intelligence. So really honing into that, because that's what's really going to differentiate us from everything else. So automate your task. Sounds simple. And I think we all can do this. And I know sometimes it can be hard because we work in corporate, and corporate can be very resistant to taking in new technology. You need all these approvals. Start by taking an inventory of everything that you do as a person. Start there. And look at all the low value-adding tasks that you do that are very time-consuming. And ask yourself, how can I replace this? If I was to hire an assistant or someone to give it to you, what kind of tasks would I give away? So that I can focus on the high value adding tasks where I need my brain. How do I make more time for that? Make a short list of those tasks and then just learn. Learn about all these tools available. I know when I started doing this maybe like 10 years ago, the tools weren't as good. But the tools have advanced at such a rapid pace today. A tool that you might have used 6 months ago is way better than it is today. So get curious about technology and become that champion of those technologies after you've tested them in your company. Because once you go from your own individual level, then you move to your team level. How can we optimize the team? And then you move to the company level. How do we optimize our processes within the company? But you have to start thinking this way. And then test and experiment. And here I say, find a colleague, because there's always that one colleague who's more tech savvy than us. And it can be a man or a woman, but men are obviously better at mansplaining, so you can ask them. And they'll be happy to explain it to you. I mean, I've found people who are more advanced and comfortable with this technology want to spread the word. They want to tell you about it. So get curious and try these new tools that are available. And as an example, I wanted to give you my list of things. And I'm not going to go through each one of these in detail, but one of the things I have to do is set up a lot of meetings. And Calendly is like my number one tool, because now I don't have to go back and forth in emails, finding a time that works. I just send them my link to my calendar. And then you can block out times, you can do a lot of fun things with it. Reclaim It is another great app that works really well with my team, because sometimes you have recurring meetings and you want to switch them around, but Reclaim, using AI, finds a time that works for everyone in your team and shifts meetings around, so you don't have to coordinate within your team. There are all these other tasks, like Google also does a lot of great things if you want to implement them. I do a lot of writing, I do a lot of talks, and I use a lot of ChatGPT. I've also recently discovered Claude.ai and Perplexity.ai. And there are 3 different tools, and you would think they would do the same thing, but they actually work very differently. For me, ChatGPT is really good at, if I'm writing an email, I can do it a lot quicker. I write a draft and then send it to ChatGPT. It gives me a refined version that's more structured, and I can even ask it to give me some suggestions on how I can make it more polite. Or, I'm sending this to my intern. What are the things that I should think about that I haven't considered? So it can really help you with your communication too. Claude AI I've started using recently, and I have felt it's very good at giving you those recommendations back. If you ask them, hey, what's missing? Can you give me some examples? For talks, it's very good at helping me come up with good transitions. Perplexity.ai, it's very good for references, because it actually searches the web and finds you the data that you need. So I can ask ChatGPT, Perplexity.ai, can you give me the data on women and what percentage of women use ChatGPT? And it'll bring up those references for me that I can then use. And as we're using these tools, what becomes really important is prompt engineering. Prompt engineering is what you ask these tools. This is going to become the new skill. And it's about how to ask better questions, how to speak AI's language. And the more you use these tools, the more you understand how do you actually frame this question so that you get the response that you need. Often it's better to break complex requests into smaller steps and use examples and constraints. And I'll give you an example here. When I first started using ChatGPT, I would ask it a question like, write a proposal for an AI training program for our company. And it would give me something very generic. And you could tell, it's from AI. If I sent that over to someone, they'd know I didn't write that. But if you are more specific and you tell them, listen, I work for an electric transmission distribution utility company, and this is the impact that we want to make. This is our budget. This is the timeline that we have. And then tell it to include these things. I want you to tell me what the business impact of it would be, the timeline, what resources are required, and all these things, and then it would break it down for you. So you have to use your critical thinking, provide it with those constraints so that it can give you the output that you need that is actually useful. So start small, start experimenting with emails. I think emails is a great way to experiment. I would spend hours writing emails, but now I can do them a lot quicker because AI just helps me refine them so much easier. I don't have to reread. Explore AI tools in your field, and don't be afraid to ask for help. And there are training tools available out there. There are training courses available that are for free. So if you really get curious and interested about them, take a 30-minute course on prompt engineering. The second most important thing is data literacy. And the most important thing here to know is that it's not about becoming a data scientist. It's about becoming a better decision maker. It's how do you take that data and make decisions based on it? Because, as I said before, yes, crunching data is important, but what's going to become even more important is how we act on that data, how we make decisions based on the data, how do we ask the right questions? It all comes down to asking the right questions. So when data is presented to you, Sandy also said this, what's the context? Ask what's missing. Like, we saw this headline that said women are not interested in AI. Who was there to ask these questions that we're asking right now? Who benefits from this interpretation, by the way? Not us. Data storytelling. Tell the story behind the data, and I'm so glad we had Sandy tell us on how to tell better stories. What surprised you? What caught you off guard? And who does it impact? What actions should we take? And this last one is making decisions. It's really important because it's not just blindly taking the data and making decisions off of it. I call it the data intuition loop. What's going to become really important is our intuition, our experience. Our intuition is kind of qualitative data that we've been collecting based on our experience. We can't put data behind it, but it's real feelings that I think we need to start giving more value to in this highly digitalized world. An example is of a professor here at UT, actually, who was working on this research. And the law enforcement agencies was using AI to help them identify people who had committed crimes. And they went and they caught 2 black guys, and they brought them into their office, and they found out that they weren't the ones who committed the crime. And so one of the guys was like, well, tell me, why did you call me in? What did the data say? And they showed them the picture, and they were like, this is obviously not me. And they were like, oh yeah, AI got it wrong. The computer got it wrong. And I think it's really important that, AI is not it's just a thing. It's not a real entity. We can't just blame AI for the wrong decisions that we make. It's important that we take accountability for those decisions and use our minds and challenge that data, because otherwise the consequences are going to be very, very dangerous. And who better to know about intuition and data than Jeff Bezos, who's created the biggest data company in the world. He said, what people don't understand is that the data says one thing and my gut says another. I'm going with my gut. And it just goes to show that even people like him who are at the top of their company, and they really flaunt that. They really talk about, often, male leaders, how they're going with their gut and they're going with their intuition. But if we women do it, it's not valued as much. But I think we need to value it a lot more in this age of AI. The second shift that I want to talk about is the decline of our work culture. I don't know if you're feeling it, but I'm definitely feeling it. And this is something that started around the pandemic with us working at home. In 2021 was something called the Great Resignation that you've all probably heard about. There were 47 million Americans who left the workforce during the Great Recession. And the reasons that they cited for leaving their jobs, it wasn't higher salaries. It was loss of connection, purpose, and meaningful work. So there's something that's happening with the over-reliance on digital communication, with the pandemic, with working in these hybrid home environments, that's really putting our work culture in decline. Let's talk about the data. The Gallup Global Workplace Report said that 23% of employees were engaged in the workplace. Only 23%. 52% of employees are seeking other jobs. And 43% decline in workplace friendship. I remember work used to be a place where you used to say, this is our family. These are the values we share. And I don't hear that talk anymore. People are almost saying like, no, they're not my family. I'm not going to invite them at my birthday party. I'm not going to invite them to my kid's birthday party. And I'm seeing that more and